Like last time, this is my top 100 albums of all time, and this time I'm gonna count down from, hopefully from number 50 to number 1, the first place. And I'm just before I start, I'm just gonna skim through the albums that I did last time, in case you want to to watch the video without having had to watch the last video. So here we go. At number 100 we have Miles Davis, Bitches Brew. 99, Meshuggah, Nothing. 98, Manfred Mann's Earthbound Watch. 97, Merzbow, Metal Velodrome, Exposition of Electrovivisection. 96, White Noise and Electric Storm. 95, Boris with Merzbow, Sunbaked Snow Cave. 94, Biophilia. 93, Gennady Roshtvinsky i Государственный симфонический оркестр Министерства культуры СССР, Schnittke Symfonia number 3. 92, Defeated Sanity, Passages into Deformity. 91, Colin Stetson and Sarah Neufeld, Never Were the Way She Was. Number 90, Amon Tobin, ISAM. Number 89, London Philharmonic Orchestra and Sublimeta, Turandot. Number 88, Komos, First Utterance. Number 87, Kazumoto Endo, While You Were Out. Number 86, The Alan Parsons Project, I, Robot. Number 85, Current 93, The Inmost Light. Number 84, My Fictions, Stranger Songs. Number 83, Gorguts Obscura. Number 82, Björk, Bastards. Number 81, The Philadelphia Orchestra and Riccardo Muti, Respighi, Pieni di Roma, Fontane di Roma. Number 80, The Orb's Adventures Beyond the Ultraworld. Number 79, Shiro Sagisu, Neon Genesis Evangelion. 78, Igor Hallelujah. 77, Swans, The Glowing Man. Number 76, Junichi Masuda, Pokemon Ruby and Pokemon Sapphire OST. Number 75, Radiohead Kid A. Number 74, Shiro Sagisu, The End of Evangelion. Number 73, Pharoah Sanders, Karma. Number 72, Liturgy Aesthetica. Number 71, Venetian Snares, Rossielag alla Cilletet, or Cilletet. Number 70, City of Birmingham Symphony Orchestra and Simon Rattle, Karol Roger and Symphony number 4. Number 69, nice, Genesis Foxtrot. Number 68, Suffocate for Fuck's Sake, In My Blood. Number 67, Portal Sepia. Number 66, Container Bjövburger. Number 65, Boards of Canada, Music as the Right of Children. Number 64, Egg, The Polite Force. Number 63, Martha Argerich, Klavierkonzert G Major, Gaspard La Nuit and Sonatine. Number 62, Noisia, Outer Edges. Number 61, Captain Beefheart and His Magic Band, Trout Mask Replica. Number 60, Egg, The Seventh Surface. Number 59, Nurse with Wound, Homotopy to Marie. Number 58, Koen Hyake Dorim Vishka. Number 57, Deltron 3030, Deltron 3030. Number 56, Roger Woodward, Music of the Russian Avant-Garde, 1905 to 1926. Number 55, Square Pusher, Feed Me Weird Things. Number 54, Culprit Deliverance. Number 53, Mats Morgan, 35th Anniversary Collection. Number 52, Pink Floyd, Wish You Were Here. Number 51, Current 9, Horsey. And number 50, Hiyo Kaiden, The Noise. And this is the first album I'm going to discuss. But before I discuss this album, this should be a really good this was a really good warm-up for my voice, and I'm just going to answer your question, Ludwig, which was what's post-minimalism again? It's basically like post-rock but with minimalism. It's like the easiest way to explain it. I can't really say anything else, but back to the list. This album is basically 30 hours of harsh noise, and it's absolutely amazing. It contains some of the best noise music I've ever heard. And here's on this segment I've actually listed my favorite discs instead of my favorite songs, because there's just so much music here that I can't even begin to go into which songs individually are the best. But disc 4 I find to be the best because unlike the other discs who are primarily based on on electric guitar and the usual free improvisation instruments that Hiyo Kaiden are using, I suppose their lineup usually is screaming, electric guitar, and drums, and maybe there is a bass too. I'm not really sure. But disc 4 contains a lot of more of elements that I like a lot. It has they use a piano and they use a saxophone, for instance, which are two instruments that I really think fit well into this kind of genre, which makes disc 4 less of a harsh noise album and more like a really, really good free jazz album. If I would recommend anything from this album, it's definitely disc 4 and also disc 9, and disc 23 contains like I think one of the single greatest harsh noise tunes I've ever heard, which is the second tune on that one. It's like 33 minutes long and is absolutely amazing the entire way through. I always find it very interesting when noise musicians manage to create such amazing like centerpieces, because most of them are improvised, and they have to be really, really good at improvising to do such a good job that I can actually distinguish it as a separate tune that I really, really like. But that's basically all I have to say about this album. If you're into harsh noise, you will like this, so I highly recommend it. At number 49 we have Paysage d'Hiver, and this, oh my god, this is fucking amazing. It's it's atmospheric black metal, that like I described, and the first tune on this album is just it's probably the single best black metal tune I've ever heard. And this album would be a lot higher if the rest of the album was as good as Welt aus Eis is. Der Weg is also a really good tune, but Welt aus Eis is just unbelievable. Now, what makes Paysage d'Hiver so interesting as a project is it's basically the vision of a single person, of whom I don't remember his name. But what he does is he does these really, really lo-fi recordings. The guitar and the drums are like they are mashed together to create like a single wall of sound, and it's just a wall, but the effect is so amazing because the wall is not very loud, and this really is reminiscent of the feeling of winter, in my opinion, and that's also what he's trying to capture in all of this. Welt aus Eis is a perfect example of this because it just feels more cold than any black metal album that I've ever listened to, or any black metal song that I've ever listened to. And you can really feel that on the album cover as well. These were released on tapes, and they're actually, to be completely fair, not really considered to be proper albums by Paysage d'Hiver himself, because he considers them to be demos. Just I don't really know why, because I think these are easily as good as, if not even better than, most black metal albums that I've ever heard. So I think they could at least be considered albums, because album feels like a higher classification, if you understand what I mean. But you are not. I don't think you're gonna like this a lot if you don't like when music is repetitive. But I really. First of all, the chords in the first song are just incredible. They sound so extremely emotional, but also like have an evil connection as well, which is what black metal usually does. And that's all I have to say about this. Really, go check it out. It's amazing. So at number 48 we have another black metal album. We have Mayhem's De Mysteries dom Satanas. And well, I don't think I can add much to the conversation that hasn't been said before about this album. It's just an incredibly famous and incredibly good album. And if you don't know the story behind this album, I recommend you Google it, because it is a fascinating story. But I'm not going to explain it here because so many people already know it. But what I think this album does better than most other early black metal albums is that it is so atmospheric. The chords sound so evil, and I also really, really, really like the vocals and the drums. I think Hellhammer did a hell of a job on this album drumming. If you first time I listened to it, I wasn't actually that impressed by the drums, because I thought it was going kind of slow. It was going like in, you know how blast beats, when you hear fast blast beats, it's usually like something like that. He was going like in this tempo. And I thought like that's not impressive at all. What's the matter? Why do people say that he's so good? But then I realized it, and that was like after the third listen, I think, that he is actually, while playing that blast beat, he is doubling with his right hand. He is playing double tempo with his right hand. So with his right hand, he's playing like, and that's insane, because he's going at even higher tempos later, and then he's still doubling it, because he has like developed his signature techniques that he is using to make that kind of playing a reality, and I really admire that style. And secondly, I mentioned that I really like the vocals. They didn't have a vocalist for this album originally, because originally their vocalist called Dead was supposed to do the vocals, who is a really famous vocalist because his vocal sounds really like evil and terrifying. But I think they got an even better vocalist for this album, because they invited the vocalist called Attila, and he is from Poland, if I remember correctly, but I'm not sure completely. And his vocals are like completely unique. He sounds like it's like, it sounds almost like throat singing, but in a black metal song, and with like a growly root to it. It's extremely unpredictable, and gives the album a very interesting and unique atmosphere compared to like other albums in the black metal genre. Even though I really like their screams too most of the time. Yeah, but this album has been discussed to death, especially with tunes like Funeral Moon. Wait, I'm blending them together. It's Freezing Moon is the name of it. Freezing Moon. It's like the most famous tune from this one, but I actually think the best tune on this album is Life Eternal, because I think the riff on that one is like one of the best riffs in all of eternity. The one that goes it's just fucking incredible riff, to be honest. And the whole tune is just it was really the tune that made this album become a masterpiece in my mind. And that's all I have to say about it. Let's move on. So at number 47 we have Suffocate, for fuck's sake. Blazing fires and helicopters on the front page of the newspaper. There is a war going on and I am marching in heavy boots. This is like the other SFFS album I mentioned earlier. It's sort of a post-rock. It's sort of a blend between post-rock, screamo, and atmospheric sludge. But I think this one is easily their best album. I used to have this album a lot higher on my list, but then I guess it just got overwhelmed by other albums that I consider to be better by the end. But this is, without a doubt, in modern music, this is the absolute saddest album I've ever listened to. It's an absolutely heartbreaking story about bipolarity and depression, and if you know Swedish, you will understand, and it will break your heart. If you don't, it's just a good post-rock album, I guess. It's interesting because I really dislike most post-rock bands. I think Explosions in the Sky is an absolutely awful band, and I would definitely have them on my top, and I would definitely have their album on my top 20 bottom list, top 20 worst albums, which I might do in the future at some point. But this kind of post-rock is really what I like. I like post-rock when when it actually, I don't know, when it actually has good songwriting, because I think the problem with many post-rock bands is that they don't really have good songwriting, which is one of the reasons why I dislike Godspeed You Black Emperor, for instance. I think while they have a lot of really, really good ideas, they really fail to execute them, especially on their first two albums, F Sharp, A Sharp, Infinity, and Lift Your Skinny Fist Like Antennas to Heaven. But these groups, like Suffocate, for fuck's sake, Swans, and those kinds of post-rock bands, I don't know if they are like a kind of their own, but I really think that their flavor of post-rock is a lot more interesting. So what's this album about, basically? Well, it's basically about a girl whose life starts spiraling out of control because of her own mental problems, and it's like a complete story in one way. It's based on a documentary on Sveriges Radio, which is the main radio channel from Sweden. And the last tune on the album, they try to cheer me up by saying I once lived a functioning life. It's an absolutely crushing tune to listen to, because the lyrics, or the text rather, from the interview with this main girl has it's like completely interlinked with the music, and it just becomes completely devastating to listen to. It doesn't even have any drums. It managed to do like a complete. Why do you always comment on voice cracks? I don't even get a voice crack. I only think it's. I don't even remember it. Oh, okay, whatever. It's not important. But that tune is. It's worth listening to the album just for that tune. But even. And one other thing I really like about the album is that it's very varied. It's like the songs go through a lot of different stages, and they have like different parts. They have sometimes they have like a soft piano part, maybe, and sometimes it's like an acoustic guitar part, which sounds like it's recorded in like a bathtub or something. And I think this album has I have listened to it a lot when I delivered mail as my at my last job, and it became a pretty sad round basically. Let's move on to the next album. This is a good one, don't miss out on this one. So now we have Mad Villain, Mad Villainy, and of course I have Comic Sans, because that's the typical that's the font that I associate with this album. This used to be my favorite hip-hop album of all time. It grabbed my attention from the start when I listened to it, and then it never let go. I immediately fell in love with Madlib's production and MF Doom's flow and lyrics. His lyricism on this album is absolutely insane. I love all the parts where he has the like internal rhymes, where every single word in two different sentences rhyme with each other, like the classical start to Meat Grinder, tripping off the beat kinda dripping off the meat grinder, which is it's a really good rhyme. But my favorite tune on the album is Raid, because the beat in Raid is just insane. The most interesting thing about the beat in Raid is that the original tune used is actually in a different time signature. It's in 3/4, while Raid is in 4/4. So Madlib has actually changed the timing a bit. Originally it sounded like, but he changed it to like, and it's extremely damn cool. It's easily the best tune on the album. This is another one of those albums where it's hard to pick a favorite tune, because most of them are just so amazing. I could name a couple that I just like, except for these. I love Bistro. I think it's like the best interlude tune of all time. I think Shadows of Tomorrow is an absolutely amazing tune as well. And Figaro, Moneyfolder. There's just so much here. And it's so coherent as well, because the tunes are so short that you never feel bored. They always switch it around, and this is like it's almost No, You Are Gay, and Figaro and Caps are not better than America's Most Blunted. The beat on America's Most Blunted is just insane. It's an unbelievable beat. But like I said, this is now my second favorite hip hop album. It used to be my favorite, but you will see which one has surpassed it in recent times. So let's move on to number 45, which is the Ghetto Instruments Disorder. And the genre for this is fuck compose, fuck melody, dedicated to no one, thanks to no one, art is over. And this is a message that I completely agree with. This is like, it's the best harsh noise album ever. It's just 38 minutes of completely like nuts. It's 38 minutes of completely nuts, absolutely cathartic and destructive harsh noise. It's like the most. I don't even know how to describe it. I guess I could describe the formula. If you have ever listened to. Okay, here is the thing. If you've ever listened to Tokyo Anal Dynamite, which is the other famous album by the Ghetto, the thing with that album is that this is basically Tokyo Anal Dynamite, but on steroids. That album has like. It's supposed to be like really intense, but I never really found it that intense. Because what makes it interesting as an album, and what makes this album interesting, is that you know how grindcore is like a genre where the songs are extremely short, and albums can be like 11 minutes long, with like 11 songs on them. Ghetto is even worse. They have in 37 minutes, which is the runtime for Tokyo Anal Dynamite, they play I think 77 songs. But this is even worse. On this album, like you see, it's a 170 song CD, as it's written on the album cover. So it's 170 songs on this album. And they range from like half a minute to a couple of seconds in length. But it's just insane, because this is one of the examples of an album that is actually better by having worse quality. The other example is Posada Viva that I mentioned earlier. But this album is the same thing, but in the other direction. In this album, everything is like overcompressed, extremely distorted, and it feels like everything has been recorded way too close to the microphone. But that just adds to the extreme insanity that it is to listen to this album. And it's like a cyclical thing too, because every like 5 seconds you get an interruption. You get an interruption with like a guitar distortion, and then he just screams on top of his lungs 1, 2, 3, 4 after naming the next song, and then the drums and everything just goes off, and it's like it's the perfect harsh noise album. I can't even say it any differently. It's the most one of the most cathartic experiences I've ever had listening to music, and it's a joy to listen to every time. If you're interested in harsh music in any way, shape, or form, you need to hear this album. It's a ride. Absolutely incredible stuff. Let's move on. So here is my favorite album by Posada Viva, Das Tor. This is his latest album, which, like I mentioned, I feel like I mentioned most of his things, most of his niche when I discussed his earlier album. That's basically what he sounds like. No, I'm kidding, but what he... I mentioned his like niche when on his last album, but in this album you can see even clearer what his inspiration is, because the landscape on the album cover is like, it's like a giant door and a snowy landscape with snowy trees, which by the way is exactly what Posada Viva means. Posada Viva is French for winter landscape, and this is just his best album, because what this album does better than the last is, while no song on it is better than the best song on the Posada Viva, the consistency of this album is incredible, and that's what really adds to the experience of listening to this. Macht des Schicksals is probably my favorite tune, because it's like this intense tune. And it sounds intense even though it's pretty weak in sound, if you understand what I mean. And the interesting thing about another interesting thing about this album is that the last minutes of every single song on this album is usually like only wind samples or something like that. So this is one of those albums that really is really benefited by it being completely quiet when you listen to it. I think I like spilled the beans for most of his earlier on what he does on his earlier album that I described. So this is basically it, but more consistent. That's all I have to say about it. Let's move on. So at number 3 we have Radiohead, Hail to the Thief, and this is my second favorite Radiohead album. An absolutely amazing experience. That is that I can't understand why people don't discuss this album more. When I first listened to it, I was going to my band rehearsal and I was like putting it on because I was and I was thinking like okay, this is gonna be like it's gonna be like the other Radiohead albums I've heard, but maybe not as good or something like that. I didn't know completely what to expect, and I got completely blown away. I thought every single song was amazing that I heard, and it's only grown in my eyes ever since. It was an instant masterpiece in my opinion, but the 3 tunes that are my favorite are really the ones who pushed for that, so to speak. Backdrifts is definitely my favorite tune, because it has this extremely interesting and cool mood throughout the entire tune, with this H minor chord playing, but it's like a synthesizer that is really really lowly emphasized. English is difficult sometimes, and I think the best thing about this album is that variation. It has like the first 2 tunes are pretty similar, but Sail to the Moon, which is the 3rd tune, is very different, and Backdrift's the same thing, and then it goes like all over the place. There are electronic tunes, there are like pastiches of different other genres, like I think they have like a standard rock tune, but with it's like a weird time signature and some spicy chords thrown in the mix. And We Suck Young Blood was my first favorite tune from this album, which is like it's a very weird tune, because I think the chords are very haunting, and the whole tune sounds like sad in a very interesting way, but it also has like a clap which repeats throughout the tune on a specific location, which makes it sound like I don't know, a failed gospel tune maybe, or something. Death Drifts. I don't know, it's not really, it doesn't really sound like Death Grips in my opinion, but and then We Suck Young Blood, not to forget, it has like one of the most incredible middle sections of any Radiohead tune, which is like when it flips out, and then it sounds almost like it has almost like the qualities that Gaib, Godspeed You Black Emperor, uses when they actually make something good. Это шутка. No, it reminded me of Sleep by them, for instance. Some parts of Sleep, that is. I still contend that tune is pretty underwhelming, because it has a bad time transitioning. But let's not talk about Gaib. I'll probably make a video in the future discussing why Godspeed You Black Emperor is an overrated band, and I have many arguments for it, but I don't want to steal time from Hail to the Thief, pun intended. Sit Down Stand Up is another one of those incredible tunes that I've listened to. Sit Down Stand Up is a top 10 Radiohead tune. Yeah, I agree. It's absolutely incredible. When the raindrops starts repeating, it just becomes incredible. and it has such a good build up to it as well. It's basically like a drum and bass tune, but made by Radiohead, and I think that's what I like about it the most. I think Bactress is better than Sit Down Stand Up, though, to be honest. But so there we have it, and now it's time for the truth. Number 42 we have Fixedwin Drugs. Now here we have actually the guy who introduced this album to me is actually in the chat right now. And well, what can I say? I thank you. It is a damn good album. It's one of the absolute best. I think it's the album that, like, it's one of those albums that expanded my taste in electronic music and was like in the beginning of when I started listening to different kinds of music. Like I mentioned in the last part, I used to listen to like drum and bass only, and then I got into Amon Tobin a little bit, and after that I got recommended Fixedwin to listen to, and I checked this album out and I absolutely loved it. I love how beat driven this album is, and how extremely detailed it is. How detailed it is probably my favorite part about it. When you listen to a tune like Mount Saint Michel plus St. Michael's Mount, which for a long time was my absolute favorite tune, period, you realize when you listen to it that there is literally not a single bar in that tune that sounds exactly like the bar before it. It's like it's a drum pattern, some of the melodic structures even, and it's just completely ever changing, and it's an absolute work of genius. Most of the and that's just one of the tunes. I could say the same thing about other tunes too, like Omega Switch 7 or Vordosbun, or especially Omega Switch 7, which contains some absolutely intense parts. And same with Vordosbun, which is like Vordosbun is almost even more genius in its creation, because it has really loud drums. It has pretty loud drums when the rest of the mix is pretty weak, and then the drums go down to like leave space for the rest of it. It's like a really good tune to listen to from a compositional standpoint, from a like structural standpoint, if you understand what I mean. And it's a 2-hour album, so you will get a lot of material on it, and I will say not everything is good. Most things are absolutely incredible, but some things are questionable. It's Fixedwin's experimental album, if you could even use that as a term, because Fixedwin's entire career is almost based on being experimental, but this is like the most experimental Fixedwin album, I guess. I guess that would be a better term for it. So let's move on to number 41 after this. Oh my god, I skipped a number. Fuck, you weren't supposed to see that. Well, I guess I can. I guess I can talk about that. I'll talk about that album when I come to it. So here is Pink Floyd's Animals, which is at number 41. And this is, I think, this is my second favorite Pink Floyd album. And yeah, what can I say that hasn't already been said? It's absolutely incredible. It has like, one of the things that makes it interesting is that it only has 3 tunes in actuality. It has like an intro tune and an outro tune, but they are basically the same. And the three ones in the middle, the 3 different ones in the middle, are the ones that are actually important, so to speak. And this is especially true with Dogs, in my opinion, which is my favorite tune from this album, and probably my favorite tune from Pink Floyd overall. It's a 17-minute long tune. I need to stop saying the word tune. I say it like all the time. Okay, it's a 17-minute long song, or piece. What do you say? Composition. And it has very interesting chords for Pink Floyd, because Pink Floyd they don't usually use chords that are that jazzy, in my opinion. But on this album, they really bring out the big guns, so to speak. and Dogs has definitely grown on me as a song, and I like it a lot more now than I used to like it. Especially the middle part is amazing, where they have, and this is probably my favorite detail on the entire album, which actually took me a couple of listens to really realize, and that is that they actually have auto-tuned or like vocoded dogs in the background who are barking while during the middle section of Dogs, while Richard Wright is playing his synthesizer solo, which, by the way, is one of the best solos in Pink Floyd history. Dogs is just an incredible tune, and the same can to a degree be said about Pigs and Sheep. First of all, Pigs contains the first F-bomb by Pink Floyd. They didn't usually swear, but Roger Waters decided to implement that in the text of Pigs. And Sheep is probably my second favorite on this album, because it has such a bombastic rhythm, and I also especially like the way that his held out note at the end of every vocal section is like slowly turned into a synthesizer sound, and I think that is really, really cool. This is definitely one of those albums that you don't really consider it to be one of their best on the first listen, but then when you listen to it more and more, you realize how genius it was. And yeah, that's it's just a damn good album. So here we go to the album that I spoiled before. Here is Noisia's Split the Atom Special Edition, and the reason why I picked the Special Edition and not the original is because the Special Edition contains all the remixes and also some extra tunes that are really, really, really good. And this is the first album I think this may be the first album I listened to, so to say. I used to be really into just listening to tunes. I wasn't really an album person until this album. And when I listened to it, I just I have listened to it quite a lot, actually. It's probably one of my most listened albums of all time. And my favorite tunes have of course varied over the time I've listened to it. Shell Shock used to be my favorite because of its insane drums, and I still consider it one of the best tunes on the album. But the one tune that I definitely didn't think of as much before was Split the Atom, which is the title tune, but I didn't really think about it before, and now I consider it to be the best of the album, because I don't know, there is something about Noisia and their style of like house music or music in the house tempo, and they are extremely good at making that style. You could hear it on Outer Edges, which is their latest album, which has Collider, which is my favorite tune by Noisia. And you can also hear it on this album with Split the Atom, which is it's one of the catchiest tunes they have ever made. And let's not even mention this. Let's not even mention the opening tune, which is Machine Gun, one of their most famous tunes ever, which also in this special edition is featured in a remix by 16-Bit, a really, really famous remix, which got played at all the clubs when this album came out. So yeah, another thing I really like about it is that it's extremely varied for a drum and bass album. They have these drum and bass tunes, but they also have some house tunes, and they also have these interlude tunes that are all extremely good. Shitbox, for instance, it's just a showcase of their incredible sound design. And the same can be said for most other, Dystopia is a really cool tune, and Paper Doll, I think that was a classical piece of some sort reversed. This album is amazing. Sunhammer is also a collab with Amon Tobin, and you can really hear it. It actually also used to be my favorite, and I still consider it to be almost as good as Split the Atom. If there is anything you should check out from this album, it's Split the Atom and Sunhammer. Actually, check out all the favorite tunes. Because Could This Be is like the best finisher tune that you could ask for. It's the end of the first disc of the album, while the second disc is the remixes. And Could This Be is just the perfect way to end it. So now at number 39 we have the Beatles Revolver. And this is an album that has definitely grown on me as well. It's sort of nostalgic in some way. Whereas Lil Pump self-titled, it's probably in the top 50 worst at least. So the Beatles Revolver, it's definitely an album that's grown on me. I used to like Tomorrow Never Knows, I'm Only Sleeping and Love You Too, which are still my favorite tunes on the album. Especially Tomorrow Never Knows. That tune was like way ahead of its time. Okay, unsub then, you fool. But then you will never know the number one album. Wink, wink. But now I realize that like every single song is really good on this album. Even Yellow Submarine, even though most people hate it, I think it's really clever, and I think it's a really nice use of. You will get the trap later, I promise. I have one trap album left, or it's like partially trap at least. And yeah, where was I? Yeah, even Yellow Submarine, because I think it uses like the different sounds so cleverly, and that makes it very interesting to me. It also contains probably the best love song by Beatles, which is it's so good because it's more like an anti-love song in one case of the word, in some sense of the word, which is For No One, because it's not really about love, it's rather about love ending, or like desire, and that's a really emotional tune, one of the best by Beatles as well. But I think the thing that strikes me the most about this album is that it really showcases how good Beatles were at composing tunes, or songs for that matter. I'm Only Sleeping is just. I'm Only Sleeping has another thing I like to mention too, which is the production on it, because the first time I listened to it I didn't even think about. Because on most albums you can clearly hear the difference between the drum, the guitar, and the other instruments. But on that album, the mix is so tight. On I'm Only Sleeping, at least, the mix is so tight that the guitars and the drums sound like the same instrument, in my opinion. They are like so perfectly blend together that they could literally be the same thing. It sounds like. I don't even know how to describe it. It just sounds so extremely organic, and that's one of the reasons why I'm Only Sleeping is one of my favorite tunes on this album. It's also because it contains an incredible reversed guitar solo, which is like, if I remember correctly, they wrote out the guitar solo in the reverse order, and then they recorded it, and then they reversed it so that it would be in the correct order again. But this is another really famous album, so I guess there isn't really a lot of unique stuff to add about this album. So let's just move on to the next, so that this won't take the whole year. So at number 38 we have Junichi Masuda Pokemon Diamond and Pearl original soundtrack, Super Music Collection. This is definitely my favorite Pokemon soundtrack. I think it may also be my favorite, or no, it's my second favorite video game soundtrack if I remember correctly. And yeah, it's just extremely solid. Most of the songs here are amazing, and I especially like the jazz influences on the entire album. There are like really jazzy chords, and it seems like the people who made it really knew what they were doing when they were adding these jazz influences. They weren't just adding like what their preconceived conception of jazz was. It seemed like they actually knew what jazz actually was, not in. You understand what I mean. I guess one of the reasons why I like this album so much is because I have so many nostalgic ties to it. This was the first Pokemon game I played, and therefore it contains so many songs that I have like memorized completely. I can see the Nier OST from a mile away. Yeah, no, maybe. Let's see. So, and it also contains some of my absolute favorite tunes in video game history, which the main example of that is Mount Coronet, which is I can't even describe how incredible that song is. I actually wanted to play it live in school with a couple of friends, but it was just too hard to put together, to be honest. Battle Team Galactic Boss and Battle Champion are two other tunes which are just classics and really need to be mentioned. I will mention some honorable tunes too, like Lake, for instance. Lake is an amazing tune, and Valor Lakefront is another one I really like. The Route 216, Snow Point City, which are really, really, really good as well. And yeah, I guess if you have played this game, you will have more of a connection to this album than if you haven't. But I would recommend checking it out either way. So at number 37, we have Swans, Holy Money. And god damn, this is a heavy album. This is from Swan's heavy period. If you have only listened to their early stuff, I bet you will be really confused if you listen to this album, because this is like an entirely different thing. With like you could say like the post-rock Swans, they used if you thought they didn't use melody, wait till you hear this album. Because this album is basically, what, melody? Notes, what is that? Let's just do like slow methodical drumming, guitars who just make noise basically, but rhythmical noise which is repetitive and fitting, and nihilistic lyrics about how we are getting screwed by everyone, and yeah, you just have a recipe for a completely exhausting album, and it still one of the best Swans albums in my opinion, especially because of Another You, which I think is actually on par with their later albums. Yeah, capitalist pigs, am I right? But Another You has like this part after it's gotten started that where Norman Westberg, or Norman West, I don't even remember what his full name was, Norman, the guitarist of Swans, where he's playing like these chords who are like going up and down on the guitar, and I can't even describe what that does to me. It's just such an incredibly cool effect, and I can't imagine how they figured it out to use it. And it's not the longest album by Swans, not at all. It's like 37 minutes long, I think, which is nothing compared to their later albums. But it's just incredibly consistent and good. So at number 36 we have Orchid, Dance Tonight, Revolution Tomorrow. Wow, this is the album that got me into Screamo as a genre. I hadn't really checked it out officially before, but I was pretty excited about listening to it because it was 15 minutes long, and I've had really good experience with albums that were that short before, but God was I overwhelmed by this album. It just drove me over, and every single song is absolutely incredible, except for the second song, which I get tired of after a while. But especially I Am Nietzsche is worth talking about this, because it's probably one of the most well composed screamo tunes ever, in my opinion. Because it has it begins with an ambient guitar passage, and then it just goes insane. You have to have heard Orchid to understand what they are doing, because their vocalist is one of my personal favorites, and their guitar play is really it's dissonant and melodic at the same time, or in different. And the drums are completely unique, because the drumming is it's based on making very weird patterns. It's no conventional drumming style at all. I've tried to drum some of the tunes, and they are really, really, really difficult just because they are so unconventional. You have to relearn how to play the drums to be able to play Orchid, basically. But it's just an incredible album. I must say though that I'm not a big fan of the album cover, to be honest. I know that's sort of heresy, but yeah, this is one of the best screamo records ever made. So now we have, this is a really, really good one to discuss. This is Excision Shambhala Mix 2009. And this is it's not really an album in the traditional sense of the word. It's a mixtape. It's just amazing. It was my jam back in the day for like the entire 2013, I think. And it has never really let go since. I think every single tune that is played in the mixtape, which are I think 51 in total, is absolutely incredible. And it has two different sections as well. It begins with a long bro step section, which has perfectly. It's not only bro step, it's dubstep as well. No, it's not really Skrillex. Skrillex wasn't really around when this album was when this mixtape was created, to be honest. But what to say? It's just banger after banger, basically, and it's hard to explain this, because you have to explain the entire culture of the mixtapes as well, because mixtapes are not only based on having good tunes, it's also based on having a good combination of tunes, where a good song is played after another. You play one song that fits together with another one, and this is especially good on this album, because especially during the drum and bass part, because I think they play Mark Instinct's Destroyed, and then it goes up in tempo and switches to Pendulum's Ransom, which is... It's interesting, because this album contains so many songs that were never, released officially. Excision and Bass Nectar's Nation, for instance, which is a tune that I looked for a long time and actually found something at last, but it wasn't official at all. It was just something pieced together. And the same thing can be said about Ransom. It was released on Pendulum's website at one time, and then literally, what song is that even? It's one of the best Pendulum songs by far, but no one has ever heard of it. And it's there is even... Excision made a remix on Slayer in one song, which is called Slade. It's incredible, because he does he has his standard drums, but then he has Raining Blood playing in the background, and then it goes over to I think that slow song from Mandatory Suicide, if I remember correctly. It's just amazing. It's one of the best. It's introduced me to so many good songs, and I think that's one of the reasons why I have it on this list. So let's now move on to Autechre, Confield, another album that has been shown to me by a guy, and this is definitely one of the best in the IDM genre. It's and also one of Autechre's best albums. It begins very easily with a song that is just basically, it sounds like metallic pieces that are put together, and then comes an ambient synth after a while. It evolves into Seafern, and then Pen Expert starts with, and Pen Expert is probably probably one of the best tunes in IDM history, because it's like it's so incredibly catchy rhythmically, and it also feels extremely varied at all times. But the most mind-blowing thing about Autechre in this on this album is that this was the album where they started to use Max, which is like, it's a music software where you actually program everything by yourself. And you can hear by this that their sound design on this album is just insane. Some of the sounds in I think Parahelic Triangle, for instance, I think was the name. The song with the triangle in it, the name. And in Lenticatacresis, which is the last tune on the album. It's like every song is a classic in the IDM genre. It's like a different kind of classic than any other genre would have with its tunes, but they are so memorable as tunes, and I love them all. I don't really know what else to say. This is definitely an album worth checking out. One interesting story I have about this album is that I was randomly one day I was randomly like looking through Discogs to see if there were any good deals on this album from nearby, from like Sweden or something, and then I saw that then exactly that day I actually managed to find it out on like Fade Records, which is a record store that I have gotten recommended before. And I rang to them and asked, is this like for real? Do you actually have Autechre's Confield here? And it turns out they had it. So I went there, but I took the train, and bought the vinyl. So I have this on vinyl, even though it's like relatively rare. And I think this is the album that will get people into Autechre most people say that the album to get people into Autechre is Try Repete, but I think it's Confield, because Confield is I just think it's way more interesting, to be honest, as an album. So at number 33 we have Naked City Live Volume 1 Knitting Factory 1989. And I really couldn't pick a different font for this than Comic Sans, because this John Zorn and Naked City is one of the weirdest acts I've ever heard. It's avant-garde jazz, but it's avant-garde jazz in the loosest sense you could ever think of. It's basically the musical equivalent of like switching TV channels on your TV. The song can like be playing some groove that you're getting into, and then just 1 second later it's switching to a completely different groove, or like a different beat or something. Sometimes a completely different song even. And this is just a live album which is showing off their ability, and I really like it. They mostly play tunes from the Naked City album, which is spoilers, it's coming up. And it plays some tunes from other albums as well. I've only listened through it once. I have listened to some of the tunes multiple times, like Snagglepuss and Skate Key, which are still some of the most incredible tunes. But to really talk about this album, I have to talk about John Zorn, because I think John Zorn is an absolutely incredible guitarist. No, I think he's an absolutely incredible saxophonist. Probably one of the best, probably the best saxophonist that I know, because he has such interesting ways to use the saxophone. He sometimes he just plays normally. Most of the times he does like these like screeching sounds, but sometimes he just like lightly puffs on it, like, and he uses that as like an effect in the music. This is like, it's an incredible album from a musical standpoint, but it's also an incredible album from a compositional and musicality standpoint, because the musicians on this album are absolutely incredible. I can't believe how they can actually be playing this tight with John Zorn's extremely out there compositions and arrangements, because they are played like on the album, which you might have thought that the material on the album was at least somewhat improvised, but I think that's one of the reasons why I like this album, because it actually spoils and shows you that the material on the album was not improvised. It was methodically composed or written together with the other band members by John Zorn and company. And to be able to hear this, and that's not the only thing, they actually improvise on this material as well. They have like an extended version of one of the songs on the album, which is the last tune. I don't remember what it's called, but it's 5 minutes on the original album, and it's like 8 minutes on this. And that song is definitely one of the best as well. It's not really as good as these shorter ones that I mentioned, like Shot in the Dark and Snagglepuss, which they are so good because they are so short and intense in their shortity, so to speak. But yeah, I got this album in New York from a store that I visited, which was it was a John Zorn focused store, which I guess makes sense because John Zorn was from New York himself. But yeah, amazing stuff, really worth checking out. And moving on, here is my absolute favorite video game soundtrack, I think. This is Jamie Christopherson's Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance vocal tracks. If any of my close friends are watching, they definitely saw this coming, I think. This is a true classic for all of us. I have played Metal Gear Rising so many times. It's an incredibly good album, and it's an incredibly good game, but the most interesting thing about this album, in my opinion, is that there is no way in hell this should work. It's like, I can't understand why I like this so much. It's like, it's super edgy, it's extremely edgy. It has like lyrics like, wash away the anger, and it will come like a flood of pain. And it's extremely edgy, but that's like part of the appeal. It like adds to everything, basically, because this album is extremely over the top. It's like it has metal. What the genre name means, cyber metal, is that it's basically metal but played with a lot of electronic instruments. It has electronic drums, for instance, and it has like these dubstep wobbles and things in that style, and that should usually turn me off, because I've heard albums like that I very, very, very much dislike. But for some reason it just works on this album. Every single song is really, really good, especially the Hot Wind Blowing, which is it's played in the DLC. The boss fight for it isn't actually that good, but the song is just incredible. It's completely unbelievable. It has such a catchy melody and everything. But yeah, most of the things here are just insane, and it really shouldn't work. But it's definitely worth checking out. So now we get to an album that should be on a higher spot, but it isn't. This is Swan's Soundtracks for the Blind. Now, I used to have this album at 10 out of 10 in score, but now I have actually downgraded it to 9 out of 10, because I don't know, I guess I don't really consider it to be as consistently amazing as I used to, but that doesn't really take away from its achievement, because it still contains some of Swan's best tunes, and is still one of my favorite albums by them. One song that I especially love that hasn't been mentioned a lot is I Love You This Much, which is like this. It's one of the creepiest Swans tunes of all time, because this whole album puts like images in my head, and that tune, it makes me imagine like if mankind was under control by like an alien force or something, and then the guitar playing in the intro of I Love You This Much would be like the sirens that are telling people that they have to go in because it's because they can't be out after 10 or something like that. It's like, and it's a really, really spooky sound. And then the entire tune is it's just nightmare fuel. It's extremely horrifying, but it's so good. And then you have the tune that makes you cry as well, which is Helpless Child. That's a devastatingly good tune. Because what makes it so cool is that they are using an organ on it, I think, or a synthesizer imitating an organ. And that is basically playing this extremely beautiful melody throughout the entire second half of Helpless Child. And there are some parts that in that song that are literally like cathartic. They make me feel like I'm like rising up from the floor or something. Helpless Child, it really can't be understated how amazing that tune is. I have never really felt the sound as much as most other people do. People usually say that the sound is like one of the best Swans tunes, but I don't feel it that much. I think it's good, but it's not that good. Animus deserves like all the praise it's gotten, though it's absolutely devastating tune as well. Is in one way it's actually a precursor to some of the tunes on their later albums, like To Be Kind, for instance, the title track of that album, To Be Kind, because it sounds like it's flipping out in like a similar way. And yeah, this album has also been discussed to death. I really, really, really like it, and I would recommend you checking it out if you want something very, very unique as an experience. I guess that's what I forgot to mention about this album. This album is very out there. Every single it's like the first song is like a drone. The second song is a sound collage piece. The third is a post-rock tune. Then you get another sound collage piece, and then you get like a live recording suddenly of some sort. It's a very sprawling album with lots of different styles. It almost feels like a compilation album, but it never really does feel like a compilation album because everything for some reason feels so coherent throughout the entire album. It feels like everything is like connected by a red thread or like a similar theme or something like that. It's just, it's great. It's great. Let's go on. Oh yes, here we go. This is a great album. Here we have Wormrot, Dirge. Now this is grindcore, like is mentioned, and you wouldn't really have noticed it if you had only looked at the last part. But grindcore is one of my absolute favorite genres of music, and this album is absolutely no exception. First of all, I absolutely love the album art. I think it's very well painted. I think it really sets the mood, and yeah, it's just great. Simply, it's great. But the best thing about this album is that it's grindcore, but it's very varied in its execution. Every single song feels like it almost feels like it's like an 18-minute long tune, which has lots of different sounding parts in it. Because everything feels connected, but still everything feels different in some way. In some ways. It also another thing that really adds to its brutality, to be honest, is that they have no bass player. They are only 3 people playing, and this really adds to the jagged brutality of some of the tunes. Like my favorite tune on the album is Spotted Pathetic, which is like it's a 31-second long tune. I think it's just enough to make you able to scrabble it on Last FM. And it contains one of the absolute nastiest riffs I've ever heard. It's an insane guitar riff in the second part of that tune. And that can be said about lots of different things on this album. The drumming is top notch. The vocals are amazing because the vocalist is like he's combining 3 different styles of vocals. He's doing the screams, the high screams. He's doing the gutturals, and he's also doing like a shouty punk style, which is like duh, duh, duh. And every single one of these are really, really cool, and they really complement each other as well. But that's the thing about this album. It's like it's grindcore, but it doesn't feel as monotone as some other grindcore albums do. It's basically the best grindcore nowadays, you could say. If it wasn't for another band which I'll be mentioning later. I'm gonna quickly take a break to fill up my water, and I'll be right back. Because you need a lot of water to make a list like this. Now, number 29. Here we have it. John Zorn, Naked City. This is the studio version of... yeah, stay hydrated, it's very important. Yeah, you need that barrel water. But John Zorn, Naked City is basically... This is the studio version of the album that was played live during the last section. I think it's even better because I just think it's more consistent, I guess. It has more tunes that I absolutely like, and more interesting versions of some of these tunes. Also, one other thing that I really like about it is that Yamataka Ai is actually doing vocals on this album, on the short tunes. Because one thing that I forgot to mention about John Zorn, which he does a lot, is he has a lot of different genre influences, and that's what I meant about this TV effect that he gets. He can do like a surf rock style or like a Latin style, and he can also play. It can also be like jazz. Sometimes he does like punk and grindcore as an influence, but with like his straightforward instrumentation of keyboard, guitar. The guitar sounds extremely cheesy on this album, by the way, and that's one thing I absolutely love. It really adds to the extremely comedic effect. The easiest way to describe this album, I think, is basically this is jazz for people with ADHD, I think. Because it's like constantly shifting. I know I've been playing it for people with ADHD, and they all love it. Or at least all whom I've played it for. I think it's like, and same for me. I don't have ADHD, but it's the way it's constantly like the way it's constantly changing and morphing, or not really morphing, just changing outright, makes it really, really cool in my opinion. And yeah, I don't really know what else to say. Oh, I guess I have one thing to discuss with it, which is the song Saigon Pickup, which is one of the funniest tunes I've ever heard, because it begins like this almost country-like tune, which like, and then it keeps playing that little tune, and then suddenly like a burst of grindcore drums, like with the saxophone playing some insane stuff, goes in for one bar, and then it goes back to the ordinary again. It's a tune that keeps you on the edge because you think it's gonna be normal for just exactly how long. You're like being suspicious. Okay, when is it gonna flip? Okay, maybe it's not gonna flip, and then suddenly it just does. It's funny. It's amazing, and I really think humor is an underrated component when it comes to determining quality in something. Because I have seen top 10 lists which only contain like the most emotionally stable and destructive albums that you could ever think, or something like that. But I think humor is something that really adds to the experience, in my opinion. And this album is no exception. It's great. It's amazing. So here we have number 28. This is Portal Ion, their latest album, and I listened to this back in last year when going to work at one day, and I didn't really fall for it that hard. But then I found it on vinyl in New York, and I just I couldn't stop listening to it for like a week. All of the songs here are just it's such an insanely good album, but it's very, very different. It's not very different from Portal's earlier album, but it's a bit different, because on Portal's earlier albums they were like focused on having a muddy mix during this doing this extremely horrid stuff. But on this album everything is a lot clearer in production, and this makes it sound a lot heavier, I guess. Except for the song Spores, which is like it's just insanity. It's basically like you can't even hear what's going on in that tune, but it's one of the best tunes on the album, definitely. And I also really like the vocals, because the vocals are very different from other bands. Other bands have like either like growling vocals or like screams or something, but here it feels like he's like here it feels like the vocalist is either whispering very loudly or like screaming like the wind or something. It's a very unique style that I can't really describe in words. But I listened to this album so much a while ago, and it's just amazing. Really worth checking out. So, at number 27 we have Swans, The Seer. And this is really an album to discuss, because this is something that has grown on me a lot. And it contains what I think is my absolutely single favorite Swans tune, which actually makes it one of my favorite tunes of all time, because Swans is still my favorite band of all time. And that tune is obviously my favorite from this album, which is Apostate. The Apostate is also a variation of the name that I've heard. And it's a 23-minute journey in drum and bass tempo, which is my favorite tempo. It's like in 170 BPM with like a drum and bass drum beat as well. It's like dum 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 dum, and it's just jamming. It's an unbelievably good song. Same with Mother of the World. It's just a repetition of that da dum da dum da dum for like 7 minutes. Not 7 minutes, like 4 minutes, until you like almost feel a headache. Because the song is like it's repeating. It's like almost bashing it into your head. One thing I like about the Seer is that the Seer is very. It feels very fairy tale like. It feels like every song is part of a fairy tale, especially with tunes like Song for a Warrior or The Daughter Brings the Water. They really feel like both sort of in the text and and especially the Seer with all its very interesting musical instruments used. It's one of the few songs. The Seer is actually one of the few songs I've heard with harmonica that I've actually enjoyed. I usually think that harmonica is like with one of the 5 sins of music, and the other five are whistling, and it's whistling, harmonica, sometimes wailing. I have a hard time remembering. It's whistling and harmonica, at least. I think those are absolutely awful elements, and they should never be used in music, unless they can be used well, which sometimes happen. 93 Avenue B Blues is also a good tune, but that's almost like a free jazz song. It has like I think it has saxophone playing, but it's like really free in its structure. And you think "Piece of the Sky" is the best song? No, I disagree. I think the first part of "A Piece of the Sky" is incredible. It has the potential to be my favorite from the album, but I'm not a fan of the part that comes when he starts singing, because I think it sounds a bit too like happy, I guess. Even though the text isn't like that, I guess it just sounds happy in the wrong way, in my opinion. But yeah, Swans this year, good album. Or not, a great album. A masterpiece tier album. And now at number 26 we have Sun Ra and his Astro Infinity Orchestra. I mean. Atlantis. And this is god tier jazz. This album is like, it's a master at conditioning you, in my opinion, because the first half is just like, it's tribal things. I like to imagine it as like, this is the song of the people, the songs of the people of Atlantis. They are playing like these tribal things with they are really chill, pretty experimental in some cases, but it's nothing too bad. You just get into it. And then side B starts after having heard these tunes, and you start listening to Atlantis, which is like the most messed up jazz song you have ever heard. It's like if jazz made Stravinsky's Rite of Spring or something, or Yanis Xenakis' Ionta. It's completely messed up. It's like, it's basically Sun Ra mashing an organ for like 20 minutes to do like textures. And then the big band starts playing and just flips out. It's the best free jazz you will ever hear. Because some parts are just completely amazing. Because there is structure, there is a motif. In the intro, Sun Ra is making like, he's making these periscope sounds almost, or these submarine sounds, like they sound like a radar or a sonar or something almost. And then I like to imagine that when he starts mashing the keyboard in different ways, it's like if Atlantis would sink, or if everything gets destroyed, basically. But it's like, it's so cool because it really sounds like a storm, even though it's just an organ. He makes the organ sound like a storm, and I don't think I've ever heard a jazz piece that captures this so well as Atlantis does. So yeah, good stuff. Moving on. So, at number 25 we have Swans Are Dead by Swans. And this is a live album to discuss. Because I didn't think this album was that good at my first listen. I thought it was like 8 out of 10. It's a great album, but it's not more than that, in my opinion. Except for Blood Promise, I've always liked this version of Blood Promise. But I've listened to it multiple times, and it grows on you, you know. You start to realize that Not Alone is like one of the coolest Swans tunes ever outside of their albums. With this, like, he's using like a whistle in the end, like, and Blood Promise is like, I think Blood Promise, to be honest, is even better than Helpless Child on Soundtracks for the Blind, because it's, first of all, it takes a tune that is completely insignificant in my opinion. I have listened to The Great Annihilator a lot of times, and Blood Promise has never stood out to me in any way, shape or form. It's just like, it's just it's just a tune that you listen to and then you're done with it. But this Blood Promise is completely devastating. They take a 4-minute tune and stretch it out to like 16 minutes or something, and it becomes more and more intense throughout the entire thing. And then it just goes down at the end, and after having like built up for what feels like an eternity, and it sounds like they're like lifting up the sky to the earth, and I don't even know how to describe it. It's amazing. And the best part of it is that after it ends, after the last chord ends, Michael says, "Thank you, we are done here." And then you hear someone screaming at the top of his lungs in the background. It is such a scary effect, but it's the perfect way to end the first CD. With just a loud fucking scream. Another thing worth mentioning about this album is this album's version of I Crawled, which is, if I remember correctly, a song from the Young God EP by Swans, which, by the way, was actually one of Kurt Cobain's favorite albums. Fun fact, that right there. But he called it the Raping a Slave EP because there is a song on that album called Raping a Slave. But I Crawled is the song that is being covered here, and that song, it features Jarbo growling, and she is a beast at it. It sounds incredible. She actually rivals Michael Gira in her intensity in that tune. Michael Gira usually has these really emotional passages when he sings. But Jarbo in that particular passage actually rivals him, and for that I will always see her as a valid member of Swans, even if some people may disagree. I think she is really, really good. Most of the songs, one of the other reasons I like this album so much is because most of the songs they are covers from a lot of different albums. It's very, very a wide range of covers. Like the first tune, Feel Happiness, I don't even remember where that song is from. But I Crawled was from the first album. There are some songs from solo albums. I See Them All Lined Up, for instance. That song is actually not the song from Soundtracks for the Blind. It's the original version from Michael Gira's original album, from Michael Gira's own album, Drainland, which is an album I actually discussed in my earlier Top 100 videos. So check it out if you're interested. I don't remember which part it was in, but I'm sure you will find it eventually if you're interested. And it's just. It has so many different albums. There are of course lots of tunes from Soundtracks for the Blind because it was the latest album at that point. But also like older stuff, and really out there stuff from side projects. I really wish Swans did this nowadays, to be honest. I wish Swans would do this on their later concerts when they do release their next album. That they took like old songs and did like a new style on them. But now I feel like I've droned on about this album for way too long. It's a masterpiece, and you know it. Let's move to the next. So at number 24 we have Meshuggah, Destroy, Erase, Improve. One of the first metal albums I ever listened to. And it's just great. It has one of the best opening tunes for a metal album, which is Future Breed Machine. It's iconic. It features a guitar sound which is repeated that was apparently... I don't even remember what it was based on, actually. But it's like the seminal gent tune, to be honest. But this was even before gent existed as a genre. One thing I like about this album is that the guitar tone really sounds like Metallica, and I've always liked Metallica's guitar tone. But this basically sounds like Metallica but on crack, because the rhythms are really, really strange. and the musicianship is very different in its structure. While Metallica may be very, very fast in their musicianship, Meshuggah are like they are playing in weird rhythms, and this is something I explained on Nothing. I think that Meshuggah's big deal is that they have these polyrhythmic structure to their songs. In future, in Beneath, for instance, you have like two rhythms playing separately. You have like the 4/4 beat, which is like dum 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 dum, and then you have a rhythm beneath, which is like dum 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 dum. It's hard to describe, but it sounds awesome in that tune. And they really developed this sound on their later albums, but this was really when it started on the Destroy Race Improve from 1995. I have listened to it many times, and I find it utterly amazing, and I think everyone who is into metal should listen to it. So here we go. At number 23, we have my favorite album by Marta Argerich, her Rack 3 and Tchaikovsky 1. Holy shit! This is really, really good. This even has a recording on YouTube. I just have to say, this is probably one of the best live concerts ever. Because this is actually played live. It's Marta Argerich playing Rachmaninoff's Third Piano Concerto live. And if you know anything about classical music, you will know that is known widely as a notoriously difficult piano concerto and a notoriously difficult piece overall. And she is just amazing at playing it. She does everything right. There are no mistakes at all. It's good dynamically. It contains some of the most like emotional passages you will ever hear from the original material. And the only version I've ever heard that comes close to this is Horowitz's version that I listened to a couple of days ago on an album I bought by him. But this is an album that has been with me since the start. I've loved it for a very long time. Never really been much for the Tchaikovsky 1, but if that one didn't exist on this album, I would definitely put this a lot higher, because Rachmaninoff's Third Piano Concerto is just such an amazing piano piece. I think it's number 9 on my favorite classical music pieces overall, and this is really worth checking out. So, here we go. My absolute favorite hip hop album, which is Skriptonit's Dom s normalnymi явлениями. This is a very, very interesting album. I actually didn't like it that much at the first listen. I thought it was good, obviously, because it has some amazing tunes. But this is like an album that has grown for me by every listen, and I think that if it continues in this vein, it will eventually end up being a 10 out of 10, because I just find more and more things to like about this album every time. Now, obviously, I can't really understand everything he's saying, because to quote someone on the Russian forum, even Russian natives have a hard time understanding what Skriptonit is saying sometimes. But it just has so many every tune is just incredible, and they are like catchy. They are sometimes experimental, and it's a really, really varied album. You start off with like the intro song, then you come to Doma, which is the same the second, and that's like an ordinary trap tune, but with some really good flow and rhythms. And then we come to one of the best tunes on the album, which is the third one, which is Ostaviet Nam, and which means leave it to us. And it's Doma means home, by the way. But Ostaviet Nam is it has like this boom bap beat, but it has a really electronic bass line, and it has an extremely catchy opening hook. He starts out the entire thing by singing like "Tu хочешь быть как мы, tu хочешь полетать," and that's extremely catchy. It gets me every time. Is this guy the Russian equivalent of A$AP Rock? Not really. I don't think his lyricism is nearly as convoluted or interesting as A$AP Rock, but he would definitely be like the Russian version of. No, I'm not really sure. I can't really say much without knowing most of his lyricism, which I don't. I have to mention some of the other tunes though. Both Vniz, which means downwards, and Okean, which means ocean, obviously. Both of those tunes are incredible as well. The first one of those are like it's like a standard trap tune, but I feel like Script is doing everything that ordinary rappers are doing in trap, but he's doing it better than everyone else. Because he just has the voice, he has the flow, and he has the energy. It's like it's an incredible album, and the emotional high point of it is definitely in Вечеринка, which means party. And that's not even a hip hop tune. It's like a somber rock tune, almost. He just sings like "Это моя вечеринка, одном этаже пластинка," and it's a really good tune, which it doesn't even have any drums for most of it, except during the end. The most famous tune on this album though has to be the final tune, which is also one of my favorites, and it's called "Это любовь," which means it's love, or this is love. And that one is also a really emotional tune. Shout outs to a guy. By the way, Ludwig, if you're in chat, invite Kazi to this chat, because I'm talking about his favorite album now. And he was the one who recommended me this album, you know. But yeah, this is just. It's just insanely good, and it just keeps getting better every time I listen to it. Okay, but fuck that then. Let's just move on to the next album. So at number 21 we have the Bulgarian Voices Angelite, "Fly Fly My Sadness." And this is it's like a culture clash. Or not even culture clash, it's like a culture fusion folk album between Bulgarian folk music and Tuvan throat singing. If you see the title and you know the bands, you will know that that this style is at least very thought-provoking as an idea. The Bulgarian Voices Angelite they are doing Bulgarian folk music. Hunhurtu is a very famous Tuvan throat singing group. And here they are doing both. It's like it's choral music with throat singing, and it sounds absolutely amazing. It sounds transcendental and amazing at the same time. Especially on tunes like "Legend," which for a long time was my favorite tune, because it has this throat singing ground to it, and then just the choir comes in, and it sounds so beautiful. With the throat because something that throat singing has always that I've always lacked in throat singing, in my opinion, is something that's always been lacking in throat singing, in my opinion, is the presence of something in the higher register, which sometimes something comes in the mid range because people are doing this thing where they isolate a higher tone and do like a whistle on it almost. But that's like a mid-range thing, I have yet to hear something that I have had yet to hear something that was in the same register until I heard this album. And if you are into any kind of folk music, I think you will really enjoy this album. So I really recommend giving it a shot. Moving on, we have my favorite album from Portal, which is Vexavoid. Now I would put what's it called, Ion here, and I figure that Vexavoid is the perfect or the best Portal album because it contains Avrion, which is my favorite tune by Portal, and just everything on this album is incredible, both from a productive standpoint. I think this is my favorite production on a Portal album, and from a compositional standpoint, I think everything on here is very well composed. And I didn't really think I would like this album that much, but I did, and I'm very happy for that. I can't really comment on the details on this album because but like the earlier albums of Portal, it's a very muddy affair, and it's very like horror metal styled. If you understand if you see what I mean, it's like almost it's a very horrifying listen, and I don't really have much else to say about it, to be honest. I've been talking so much about Portal that I'm sure you understand pretty much what you're in for when you listen to it. But Avrion, definitely a tune to check out if you're gonna check out this album. Let's move on to number 19. God, we're down to like top 20 now. So at number 19 we have Kronos Quartet, Black Angels. This is damn cool music. I would argue that this is one of the best modern classical albums I've heard, if not even the best. It's not the best, it's the second best, probably. And the main reason for this is because of George Crumb's Black Angels. Now, George Crumb is an American composer, and recently he has really grown to become one of my absolute favorite composers, because I just love his style. He's very minimalistic, but he is also but he is very good at being creative. He has an enormous amount of interesting ideas. For instance, Black Angels is this album overall, like the title suggests, is for string quartet, which usually contains a first violin, a second violin, a viola, and a cello. That's the usual setup for a string quartet. And Black Angels is like it's the seminal experimental piece for string quartet, in my opinion. It has an enormous amount of experimental techniques being used. For instance, the noise that is created when you draw your bow very slowly is very utilized in one of the tunes of this album. It has It even has playing on glass, on crystal glass, with your bow to create notes, and that's like a meticulous part that you have to prepare to play this piece. Another thing that really adds to it is that the guitars are amplified by electronics in this piece, which makes it possible to hear the smallest possible sounds from the guitar from the strings easily. Which for instance, they have some Ponticelli parts that are absolutely amazingly good, where they are playing like with the where they are playing extremely. I don't even know how to describe it, but this piece is just it's one of my it's definitely my top 5 classical pieces of all time, and I'm so happy I found it randomly in a YouTube video. and that made me check out this album, and I'm very glad it did. It's interesting though, because Black Pieces is considered by many people to be a very creepy album, and rather the composition, I mean, is considered to be a very creepy composition. But I wouldn't even I wouldn't even consider it the most creepy composition on this album, because that's Istvan Marta's Doom Asai, which is a very unsettling composition, which uses a tape loop and string quartets. Check it out. And of course we cannot discuss this album properly without discussing the string quartet number 8 by Shostakovich, which is a famous piece because it was written in 3 days by him, and it's I think it's one of the most famous string quartets out there. I honestly would say that this is not even close to being the best version of it, because they are actually not even playing all the correct notes, in my opinion. The second part eventually is very rushed, in my opinion. It's played at a lot higher tempo than many other parts, and they are not playing every single note as it's written in the sheet music. I think the best version of string quartet number 8 is probably the small amount I've heard from Janine Janssen's live version in a specific place. It's just the most intense version you could find. It's somewhere on YouTube. Just look up Janine Jansen. And Misha Maisky is also playing it, which is Misha Maisky is also playing it, which is a really, really good cellist. So I would recommend finding that version. It only contains the second part and a bit of the third movement, but the things I've heard from it is just amazing. But let's move on. We have talked enough about this album. It's great. So at number 18 we have my favorite Radiohead album, Amnesiac, and first time I listened to this album, I thought it was gonna be like a worse version of Kid A, basically, and boy was I wrong. It turned out that I was hooked on this album from the first moment I listened to it, and I liked every single song. I thought it was incredibly consistent. It was just an unbelievable experience to me. And the moment I realized this was when Pyramid Song struck, which is definitely my favorite tune on the album, by the way. It's just, and probably my favorite Radiohead song. I know it's a very standard choice for favorite Radiohead song, but it's just so incredible, I can't really say anything else. Another tune on the album that is extremely underrated in my opinion is Pull Revolving Doors. It's probably my second favorite Radiohead tune overall, and that is because I think it even beats Aphex Twin in how cool it is. It has like this really stuttering beat, and the lyrics about doors are brilliant. And I also like the synthesizer in it a lot, and that it actually samples Pyramid Song's ending. Same with like Spinning Plates. Like Spinning Plates has actually a very, very cool effect to it, which I'm not sure how well utilized it is. I'm not sure if it's an effect or rather like this. I'm not sure if it's actually an effect or if it's an illusion as a result of the song, because Like Spinning Plates is based on a reversed sample, and for the beginning of the tunes, it sounds like Tom York is singing in reverse. It sounds like his words are reversed. And I can't believe it. It's just such a cool effect to have. It took me a while to notice as well. Most of the other tunes of this album are amazing too. While I prefer the Kid A version of Morning Bell, I think this version of Morning Bell is also really cool and is actually different enough from the Kid A version to justify it being on this album. And same goes for what do you call it again? I don't remember. I don't even remember what the song is called. I remember most of the songs, but I'm just tired at the moment, I guess. Knives Out is another really good tune, and You and Whose Army is another incredible. This album is just filled with incredible tunes. You need to check it out to see everyone, but yeah, great album. So here we go with one of the most impressive albums I've ever listened to, which is Otaker's Elsek 1-5. This album is like, it blew my mind when I first listened to it. Never ever before had I heard like a 4-hour long album with such a consistent output of music on it. It's I'm serious, like almost every single song on this album is worth checking out, and it's like it's 4+ hours long. And that's what really speaks to its strength. It's 5 different parts. The first part is very, very electronic centered. It shows off the sound, and it's very interesting because Otaker actually chooses to start the entire Elsek with the most abrasive tune on the entire album. It's almost like a fire test to like scare the people who aren't ready for this album away, basically, which I think is awesome and cool because it's actually one of my favorite tunes on the album, and it's Feed 1. That's the first tune on the album. But it's definitely the hardest one to get into, except for maybe Elix 6 Onset, which is the first tune of the second album, and that one is insane as well. But I have to say that my favorite part of this album is definitely number 3, because it contains Easter, which is the first ever example before NTS of I've heard of Otaker doing ambient, and it's a really cool ambient tune which I play every Easter, by the way, obviously, because it's called Easter. And then the second centerpiece of it is Mesh Cineral, which is probably my second favorite Otaker tune of all time. It's a 23-minute long, extremely dense piece with some of the best sound design I've ever heard, and that can be said for this entire album. Most of the sounds here are it's unbelievable how they sound. It's unbelievable to imagine how the sounds were made. And that's one thing I really like about Otaker. So really recommend this album, and it's on Spotify now, so it should be easier to check out as well. So at number 16 we have Wormrot Voices, which is my favorite album from Wormrot, and this is their latest album from 2016. I think this is basically Dirge but better, because they actually added some screamo influences on this album. It's like it's more focused on these sort of melodic parts almost, but they are melodic in a like dissonant way, if that makes sense. But it's a bit different from Dirge, is what I'm trying to say. And another thing I think the album does better than Dirge is that the production is better than on Dirge. It's just an insane production of this album, and because you can really feel the bass here more than you could on Dirge, and that really adds to the effect, in my opinion. I have to mention as one of the standout tunes on this album, Outworn, which is absolutely nuts tune. It contains a part where the vocalist is like screaming da, 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 and then blast beats come in, and it's like the most intense part I've almost ever heard in a metal song. And then it has this like really slow part which you just want to go around and like punch people when it comes. It's an incredible album, and I actually think I'm gonna stop it there because I'm getting way too tired, and I think my thoughts will be better collected on the last 15 albums if I do it later. I will do it maybe tomorrow, or a different day. I think tomorrow sounds good though. Let's do it tomorrow. So thank you for listening to this stream, everyone, and I'm emphasizing one because I think there's only one person listening at the moment. But so basically we get the last 15 albums tomorrow. I'll see you all then. Bye.